I began to discover swap with just full of tens and tens and tens and hundreds of cases, which was showering me. And in 2 years, I was having an office with 14 staff lawyers working for me, just one-way ticket in defense of Palestinian prisoners inside the Israeli prisons. There is one fact that Gaza is one of the oldest cities on earth. My uncle's house, which was just next to us, was exploded by the Israeli army and destroyed.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Alchemy of Transformation, where we research and discuss in depth the nature of things. Please subscribe and join our channel on YouTube as you hear about in-depth topics, complex topics with experts who have spread a lifetime in the field. We are very lucky to have with us someone who has been an active player in Palestine matters, Palestine-Israel negotiations for the last 50 years. We have with us a very renowned lawyer, a human rights activist, Mr. Raji Sourani, who is the founder of the Palestine Center for Human Rights, which he set up in 1995. But his engagement predates that. He has been extensively involved in human rights matters, especially related to human rights violations, also detention, deportation, and prison conditions in Israel. He has been declared an Amnesty prisoner of conscience. He was a vice president of International Federation of Human Rights, and he was imprisoned not once, not twice, but 4 times by the Israelis, specifically on one occasion for membership of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. He has also been detained by the Palestinian Authorities. So Mr. Raji Sourani is someone who has been a critic of both sides of the divide and an ardent human rights activist and an advocate. His family survived in Israeli airstrike on the 22nd of October 2023, where his house was destroyed. So we have someone who's a Robert Kennedy Human Rights Award winner, an insider, an outsider. Joining me from Madrid is Mr. Raji Sourani. Thank you very much, Mr. Raji, for joining the Alchemy of Transformation podcast.
Thank you, Brother Ahmed. Thank you.
So, Mr. Raji, tell us about your own personal journey. Tell us about yourself. Where were you born? Your family history. The area of Gaza is very interesting. It has been on the confluence of wars, new kingdoms for the last 4,000 years. My understanding is Gaza is about 4,000 years old from Canaanite period. And so tell us about your family, where your family history comes from, and your current roots in Gaza.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm Gazan. I'm deep-rooted Gazan. My family there for centuries. I belong to a family I'm proud of. They've been all the way long. I mean, successful either in business or in law. And we have history with politics as well for many, many years. My grandpa was the first mayor of Gaza. And the other was one of the renowned political leaders, for Gaza Strip. Now, my family, it's my dad is a businessman, and I have 7 brothers, 1 sister, all of them educated, very well educated, dentist, engineer, banker, businessman, and agriculture engineer, and a teacher. So I grown up in warm, nice house privileged, relaxed in our economical situation, and I'm one of the lucky ones, but that didn't bring any change, to our concept life. We were always with the people, close to the people, part of the people. I grew up in a national family, where Palestine was present, all the time in our life. And my father was very vocal in this regard, and he raised up rightly with my mom how to love and defend our country and how appreciate living in it. And he was very aware about the history and the background of it. I think my first shock was when the occupation of 1967 happened, and I was pretty young. I was then 14 years old. Just to raise up my eyes, having the occupation, that's too much. My first brother was arrested very early, 1 year after the occupation, and he was sentenced for 3 years for being part of the resistance at the time. My other brother flee Gaza because they wanted to arrest him, so he left Gaza. And my uncle's house, which was just next to us, was exploded by the Israeli army and destroyed. I was raised, at that time when Gaza was ready, the resistance controlled it during the night, and the army controlling it through the day, as Moshe Dayan said. So it was very fierce resistance, because in Gaza was like the incubator for the Palestinian national movement. So all these elements, were coming cross together. The family, the national education, the warmth, the occupation, the imprisonment of my brother, the other brother wanted, and he left, Gaza for that. And I went early, to school in Bethlehem, or dad sent me there. We used to invest in education. So it was German school for 3 years. I was there, and I studied in this German school, finished my secondary classes. And then I went to the university in UK, and my intention was to study medicine. After 1 year, I realized this is not really what I want. And I left UK to Beirut, and I began study law. Soon the civil war erupted, and then I went to Alexandria, where I finished my classes there, and I went back to Gaza, so determined to stay there. And a couple of years after I began my training and stagiaire as lawyer, I was arrested for 3 years and sentenced for 3 years. So it's a long journey since then. But this imprisonment was very, very eye-opening for me. I began to think of how to use effectively my time in these 3 years and how to control my time in these 3 years. So I decided first to study Hebrew, and I learned the Hebrew language. I speak it, write it like an Israeli, I would say. Second, I decided to study all the literature related to international law, international material law, and the human rights. So I gave very, very good time for Geneva Conventions, the four of them, and the commentaries, and all issues related to that. And thanks for the ICRC, who was bringing these things, to us when I was at the prison. And after that, I decided to study the Israeli military orders, all of them, together, and to be devoting some of my time and energy in defense of the Palestinian prisoners. The prison was very, very eye-opening for me because I discovered how stupid I am, how shallow my knowledge about what's going on there. And it was very, very educational for me on many levels, on the professional level, because I went through the interrogation and torture and it was on my skin. And I saw inside the relation between Shin Bet or the Secret Service, the police who takes the affidavits from you after they force you to confess, and the prosecutors and the judges. You see it from inside. I don't advise every lawyer, to go to the prison to understand that, but I think I was lucky because I went through that experience. Then I saw, how the Palestinian being dealt in Israeli military legal system, which is ugly, bad, lack of ABCs for justice and dignity. And finally, I was having real good time to think, reflect, and strategize to what I need in my life. So I would say these 3 years in the prison was landmark in my life. And when I left, I was accused by the Israelis in the last day of my imprisonment, any charge I can spend for it 20 years. And this passed, after sometimes, and I was acquitted from it. Now, I began to invest some of my time for defending Palestinian prisoners, but soon, a few months later, I began to discover swap with just full of tens and tens and tens and hundreds of cases, which was showering me. And in 2 years, I was having an office with 14 staff lawyers working for me, just one-way ticket in defense of Palestinian prisoners inside the Israeli prisons.
Fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the history of Gaza, because technically Gaza was controlled by Egypt, the strip of it, and it was taken in 1967. So that is what you are referring to as being the trauma of being under occupation. And before then, also it used to change sides. It has been under Romans, under Hellenic. It's a lot of different influences that Gaza has had, and a lot of people, different types of people who've lived there. So tell us a little bit about the history of Gaza, for people, because people don't know from the time of being Alexander the Great, having ransacked Gaza in a siege for 5 months, conquered it, and then subsequently under the Roman Empire and also under the Byzantine Empire and then the Ottoman Empire. Tell us a little bit about the different cultures there, the different ethnicities, how people have lived together for centuries over about it. So I think people will be very interested to know this place, which is a place of war, the history behind it.
Some say, historians, that Gaza, one of the oldest 6 or 7 cities on earth. Now, whether this is true or not, there is one fact that Gaza is one of the oldest cities on earth. Number 6 or number 20, but it is one of the oldest cities. You can tell, you can feel, you can smell. There is deep sense of history at that part of the world. Gaza location, it's the hell and it's the paradise. It's the hell because any invader historically thought about Palestine, about Jerusalem, about the Middle East, Gaza was the entry point, and Gaza was the exit point. So if you want to go to North Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, the choice zero to go through Gaza. If you want to go from North Africa, Egypt, towards Sham, Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, it's compulsory road too. Even between India and Europe, the road was going through that. So there is one part of it through the sea and the other part through land and through Gaza. All the invaders, I mean, Romanians, Greek, Crusades, came through Gaza. The British through Gaza, the French through Gaza. So every civilization contributed in a way or another, in positive or negative sense, to Gaza. There is port in Gaza. They found in it, according to Father Beatrice, the French archaeologist, 57 kinds of jars. And he said to me, that means Gaza at some stage was connected with 57 destinations, bringing all kinds of goods to Gaza. The goddess of Gaza before Christ was Marna. Very beautiful goddess, and people used to believe in it. And after that, we have had the Christianity in Gaza, the very, very old mosque in it used to be church, actually. And there is 3 of the oldest churches on earth are located in Gaza. We have, during the period of Christianity, pilgrims coming from Europe through Gaza. And Gaza was very, very active business place as well for a trade with Palestine and other regions. Now, after that, I mean, we have the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad in Gaza. He stayed in Gaza and he lived in Gaza, and we have Imam Shafi'i as well, raised and died in Gaza.
Oh,
and
wow.
There is one of the biggest mosques. Yes.
And
yes.
Abdul Muttalib, and you are saying is the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Did he live in Gaza? He passed through Gaza.
He lived for a short time and passed through Gaza as well.
Because of course it was a trading hub, and Makkah was a trading community.
Exactly. So there is, I mean, real history. We have some of the mosques exceeding, I mean, 12 centuries in Gaza. We have some of the churches exceeding 17 centuries. By the way, some of them destroyed, eliminated during this war. Gaza in the modern history was entry point for General Limby when he conquered Jerusalem. And General Limby, through Gaza, where he had the 3 battles with the Turks, and in the 3rd he was able to make it and to go to Jerusalem and to have the British mandate, which during the British mandate we were able to have the bad Balfour Declaration, which promised Israel of having the state in Palestine. And in 1948, Gaza was the lion's share of Nakba. They defended it, and the Israelis were not able to take over it. And quite a lot of refugees immigrated from the southern part of Palestine and come to Gaza. So that's why almost 2/3 of the Gaza Strip demographic structure are refugees. In 1948, the Nakba happened, and that was the consequence of the Nakba, that we are having this small strip filled with refugees, poor, who left everything in their homeland, thinking it's a matter of a month or 2 and they will be back. But unfortunately, this shifted to be, for good. And we were administered by the Egyptians in 1948. And things were fine till Jamal Abdel Nasser made his revolution in Egypt. And he took over. And Abdel Nasser fought in Fallujah, near Gaza, with Gazans. So he was in Palestine, and he knows the situation. And they think part of the conspiracy was the king and the regime at the time in Egypt, who didn't fight, really. I mean, the Israelis at the time who took over. Now, when Nasser came, he began to pay very serious attention of Gaza. So he sent his best people to Gaza. He gave Gaza full free education and access to the Egyptian universities, not only for those who can pay, but even for the poor. And he encouraged education very much. He made Gaza a free port for socialist Egypt at the time. So economical situation improved very significantly. Gaza was a free port for the 35 million Egyptians at the time. So they were able to trade back and forth and make real good, decent life. So when the Gulf state began to import some labor and some educated people, teachers, judges, doctors, Nasser gave the priority to Gaza, and people began to go and work there. And that contributed a lot to the economical situation. We were able to have the first trade union. We were able to have the first writers' union. We were able to have the first women union, and the Palestinian PLO was formed and based in Gaza, and the Palestinian army was in Gaza, and that contributed quite a lot. The mixture of education, national and pan-Arab environment, the support of Egypt, the Gaza Free Port, PLO, political freedom, and finally they established the Palestinian Legislative Council in Gaza. And there was election, and Dr. Haidar was the speaker of the council at the time. And that was, I mean, very special and unique. It's like little Palestine. I mean, was in this small strip, the 365 square kilometer. During this period between 1948 and 67, I would say that Israel, France, and UK invaded Sinai and Gaza, and Israel took over Gaza, and they did massacres in it at the time. And there was very serious resistance to the Israeli occupation. And I think that was one of the test cases. But then the Americans were not supporting the idea of occupying Gaza and Sinai. And Eisenhower, in simple words, he kicked them out and asked them to leave, and they left.
This is at the time of the Suez crisis, correct?
Sorry?
This is at the time of the Suez crisis.
Yes. Yes,
when
exactly.
the French and the British and the Israelis tried to gain control of the Suez crisis. This is that year.
Exactly, Ahmed. So this was something in between 48 and 67. And then, I mean, out of the blue, the 67 occupation happened, and Israel occupied Gaza, West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And Egypt, just to be accurate in this regard, at that period of almost 20 years, they administered Gaza. They didn't annex it. They didn't intervene in our social, economical life. They held a lot Gaza, and they supported Gaza by all ways and means. And I think that contributed a lot to strengthen and enhance the Palestinian national movement, unlike, for example, Jordan, because Jordan annexed Jerusalem and West Bank, and they were part of the United Kingdom, unlike, Gaza, which was just Palestinian, and never it was annexed to Egypt, and it was administered, but Palestinians in Gaza ran it.
Fascinating. And I was just recalling that even the Roman Emperor Titus also had been to Gaza. Of course, they conquered it. And King Herod, his kingdom also included Gaza.
Yes.
So it has a very rich history and unfortunate present moment. And being located in a crossroad, of course, large empires, powers have always tried to gain control. I wanted to ask you for knowledge of people, since people only know about Fatah or Hamas, about the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which is actually the second largest movement, a pro-Palestinian movement. And the founder was a Christian, George Habash, as I know it. So tell us a bit more, since you have an past association with it, about that organization, because people think of the Palestine campaign as being only Muslim and Jewish matter, whereas there are a lot of Christians who have been very prominent in the struggle for independence of Palestine.
We have in Palestine 37 prophets came. And we have the three major leading religion in the world: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And our history history of tolerance. You cannot have such country with such diversity and live in harmony, coexistence, if there is no big heart and big mind and real deep heritage of taking the other and accepting the other. And I think Palestine is one of the very good example for that. Twice religion triggered, not by Palestinians, but it's by external elements. The first, it was the Crusade War. So all these European armies came to Palestine, flagging Christianity, destroying Islam, etc. And the retaliation, reprisal was by Salah ad-Din. And I think what Salah ad-Din did set a good example for everybody how religion can be evil and how religion can be paradise. When you recognize the other, deal with them with dignity, with respect, with rights, with the rule of law, things are fine. And this is what had happened after Salah ad-Din liberated Jerusalem and liberated it from the Crusades, who wanted to apply the rule of jungle at that. And the second, we never ever thought there will be a Jewish state or Israeli state. When Europe was evil and they persecuted, Holocaust the Jews, they fled. When they fled, they came to the safe haven. They came to Palestine. And people in the 20s, 30s received them warmly, nicely, sheltered them, feeded them. And they were part of us. This is us. This is our history. But we have nothing to do, with what your religion is, what your beliefs are. It's a place of tolerance. It's a place of reconciliation. And it was a great shock for us to see those whom we protected and fed, who skipped Europe because they were victimized. We become the victim of the victim. And not only that, they tell you, you don't exist. And they do to you what Europeans, did to them. I'm saying that because we are not religious sensitive. We never use this. PLO charter, actually, and many doesn't know, in 65, doesn't say this is Islamic State or Palestine going to be Islamic State.
Wow.
It says we want democratic, secular state. In it lives, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and I will add, even atheists. What's the problem? But our way of thinking absolutely different regarding religion. Israel want the religion, to be flagged. And that's why it's normal to have, we were having 14 Palestinian political parties as members in the PLO, none of them religious, none of them, like Christian or Muslim. And this is a deep reflection about reality, about our nature, about our people, about our political orientation, about our social structure, about our way of thinking. To have 14 political parties with no exception, none of them, they were part pan-Arab, other part socialist, some others Marxist, some other just classical, and even the Kafka within the 14 political parties, the PFLP was one of those parties, and it's headed by Dr. George Habash, who is the leader of the Marxist-Leninist party.
Yes.
I mean, it has nothing to do with the Christianity.
Yeah.
And this is the fantastic mosaic of the Palestinian political structure. For Jihad Islamic and Hamas, they were formed in a very, very later stages in 1980.
First Intifada, roughly.
Exactly. So in the late 80s, I mean, they were formed. So they are even newcomers, I mean, to the Palestinian political structure. And I think that was, in part as a response on insisting on the Israeli incitement, declarations, emphasis of the Jewish state, of Judaism, of bringing the religious dimension to the conflict. So that came as very natural response, I mean, on that. But basically, our political structure is based on pan-Arab, socialist, Marxist, Leninist political groups. Maybe, at some stage, I mean, PFLP was with Fatah the leading in the struggle, whether in the occupied territories or outside the occupied territories. And this was part, I mean, of the political environment in Palestine.
So my question then is that, so rise of Hamas in Gaza, mostly to do with the disengagement, what they call the disengagement of Israel in 2005. So from pan-Arab socialism to a political Islamic Hamas movement, how did this transfer happen of support, political power shifting away from PLO, from others to Hamas in the West Bank?
In the late 80s, people revolted against the Intifada, against the Israeli occupation, and they made the Intifada. And what's the Intifada concept? And the Intifada was led basically by PLO groups. That's clear, that's evident, and the last 14 months were absolutely led by the PLO factions. What does that mean? That means, people are not the lovers of the occupation. They want their dignity, they want their freedom, they want an end for this criminal belligerent occupation, and they want free Palestine. Because Israeli claims was, look, Gaza and West Bank, including Jerusalem, is the good example for Palestinian-Israeli coexistence, for Arab-Israeli coexistence. And people say, no, they are liars. They are not telling the truth, and the truth that we want, our dignity, freedom, and independence. Now, with that, this didn't work. And the Intifada was peaceful. And after that, shortly, we began to see different kind of Intifada when the Israelis really inflicted death and killing and massive arrest against the Palestinian people who revolted against it. And then the idea of armed struggle began to come again, and the Intifada was militarized. There was negotiations, Madrid conference, and then we have had Oslo Accords. Oslo Accords, I think, one of the bad signs of the Palestinian modern history. I was one of those who rejected it fully. It didn't say one word about ending the occupation or recognizing the occupation. It didn't say one word about our independence, about our borders, defining the Israeli borders. It didn't say anything about our right of self-determination and independence. So we signed that. We signed this bad agreement. But of course, the Palestinian political legitimacy who made it, it was President Arafat, the head of the PLO, the chair of the PLO, who signed it. Now, after a few years, we began to feel this is not a peace. This is something taking us to a new destination. And this so-called peace turned to be a new brand of apartheid. So Israel used or misused this to impose fait accompli policy and to begin with massive confiscation of land, massive transfer of the population, massive Judaization to Jerusalem and the West Bank. Then, they declared they are unilaterally withdrawing from Gaza. I remember in 2005, PCHR issued a report or position paper. And in it, in concept, we said the following. What Israel did, redeployment of its forces only. There is no withdrawal. And the redeployment for the forces, making it effectively control land, air, and sea, Gaza. This redeployment make Israel losses much more, and it makes it reinforcing all its energy, resources to the West Bank and enhancing the settlements policy in the West Bank and derailing the discussion about the Gaza. So the legal definition of occupation, effective control of life of civilians by other country, and Israel was counting our breath. They are controlling Gaza, land, air, and sea. They can encourage anytime. They can get anybody, anytime, round the clock, by drones, by aeroplanes, and targeted assassinations happen, targeted killing happen. Incursions to Gaza 6 times happened whenever they wanted, 2008, 9, 2012, 14, 17 at the Great March of Return, also in 2021 and 22, 23 May. So Israel not only able to effective control for Gazans, but more and much beyond. They are controlling movement of goods and individuals, so nobody can get in or out without their permission. No item can go to Gaza without their permission. Beyond that, which shows, the Israeli effective control on Gaza, until now, as Raji Sourani, I lived my life and my family are there for centuries. I'm resident of Gaza. I don't have nationality. The nationality unclear. Who decide about my residency? Is it Hamas or the PA? Neither nor. The one who decide on my residency, it's the Israeli army. They decide whether I'm resident of Gaza or not, whether I'm allowed to come to Gaza or not. So Israel effectively controlling Gaza. And they are the occupying power. And we were able to recruit many and to give this position to many who were convinced with the same position we are having. In FIDH or Human Rights Watch or Euromed Human Rights Network or Amnesty or all UN legal bodies who recognize this. That Israel is still occupying Gaza Strip. Now, if you are occupying Gaza and if you are effectively controlled, then it's legitimate that you resist the occupation. And the failure of Oslo Accord, which was mirage, people discovered afterwards it's nonsense and it's leading to nowhere, and it's just a new brand of apartheid, a new version of the occupation. This environment encouraged, a lot to initiate resistance again, to resist the occupation again, to pull their strength again and fight. Hamas, Jihad Islamic, was one of those, again, who began to resist effectively the occupation and make different face of the dealing with the Israelis, and again putting things on the right track, that there is a real problem. It's not derailing the discussion to this and that, but the problem it's the occupation, and we have to have an end for the occupation in Gaza, West Bank, including Jerusalem. We have to address the issue of self-determination and independence. We are entitled for that. We have dignity, we have freedom, we have to fight for it. So here, came Hamas as symbol of resistance, to the occupation, and as part of our Palestinian political structure. So Hamas, there to be genuine part of that. And when the elections happened in Palestine in 2006, 2007, Hamas took over. We pushed them and we urged them and we asked them to take part of that, and they participated and they were part of that, and they won the elections. Now, whether you are a big fan of Hamas or not, whether you like it or not, this is something, but they are part of us, part of our Palestinian chemistry, part of our Palestinian political structure, part of our Palestinian legitimacy. And they won the elections legitimately, and they should be taken over. The disruption happened when, the West just decided, especially US and EU, that they are not going to recognize the results of the elections. US forced Israel to accept Hamas to be part of the elections. And when they were part of it, out of the blue, they decided not to recognize the result. I think this is one of the selectivity and politicization of the most unique and wonderful democratic practice of the Palestinian people. But they wanted to make that happen in order to make the Palestinian political division happening again.
Interesting. I will read out a text from Ehud Olmert, who of course became the Israeli prime minister, about the disengagement plan. So it goes something like this. There is no doubt in my mind that very soon the government of Israel is going to have to address the demographic issue with the most seriousness and resolve. The issue above all others will dictate the solution that we must adopt. And it goes on to say, we need to implement a unilateral alternative. More and more Palestinians are uninterested in a negotiated two-state solution because they want to change the essence of the conflict from an Algerian paradigm to a South African one, from a struggle against occupation to a struggle for one man, one vote. That is, of course, a much cleaner struggle and a much more popular struggle, and ultimately a much more dangerous for us. For us, it would mean the end of the Jewish state. And that's what he says. So it's interesting that they saw that the Palestinian demographics growing in a direction where you would have to either be a democracy or an apartheid state, or lose the essence of being a Jewish state.
This is a very classical Israeli way of thinking. First, making emphasis about the purity of the Jewish state. Yeah. We want the state to be for Jews. I don't understand this evil West, how they can accept or understand or support such a state. I mean, imagine any given country in Europe say, we are a Christian and France just a place for Christians and we won't allow any other one, to live in it. And they have to leave France. Mm-hmm. Or this happens, in UK or in US. This is absurd. People thinking that way. How they agree of having a Jewish state, the terminology. The second, he said it, we are a demographic problem. We are not a people. We are not entitled for self-determination and independence. We are not entitled for freedom. It's a demographic problem. I have to get rid of the demographic problem. We are the stones of the valley. We have been there since ever, and we will continue there forever. And no power on earth will be able to take us from there. We have been there, we are there, we will continue to be there. Look what they are doing with Gaza. Genocide. 38 has been killed, 38,000 has been killed so far. Another 9 to 10,000 under rebels, unable to be uncovered. For months they are under rebels. And we have 85,000 injured people there. 1/3 of them will die, definitely, because of lack of hospitals, equipments, medicine, etc. It's not only that. We have every day 10 children, their limbs amputated every day. Second, we have massive destruction. 80% of Gaza has been destroyed. More, the displacement of 1.6 million people who were forced to leave. their houses after the bombing, after the destruction, after all what happened in Gaza, and they are now cornered in 40 square kilometers. Starvation, man-made starvation, not because we don't have food or money to buy food, no. Starvation in Gaza. Now, with all this, nobody left, and nobody would leave. We are not ready to have a new Nakba in Palestine. We are the stones of the valley. We have been there since ever, and we will continue there forever. Now, Mr. Olmert say this is demographic problem. Sorry. This is first-class political problem. We exist, and we are there, and we are paying dearly and heavily for our dignity, for our freedom, for our Palestinian coming state. Now, Olmert saying two-state solution, one-state solution. If we, the Palestinians, say we want one-state solution, they will say simply, they want to destroy Israel. They want to destroy the purity of the Jewish state. And no Israeli will accept the one-state solution. It's in the PLO charter. We are not inventing the wheel. It has been since 1965. One democratic secular state. But they want Jewish state. And when we say, okay, happy to compromise, we want two-state solution on 22% of historical Palestine. They say right of self-determination only for one, for the Jews. Why? Because God promised. Now, this selectivity, it leads nowhere, Ahmed. This dehumanization of Palestinians leading nowhere. International law, international humanitarian law, and the human rights, you cannot deal with it selectively. You cannot politicize that. It's there. It's a clear cut. We have all the political, legal legitimacy to practice our right of self-determination and independence in a Palestinian state. Look for Ukraine. When Ukraine was, as the West say, invaded and occupied by Russia, they were the two pillars Europe supported Ukraine with, against occupation, against invasion. And they said Ukrainians do have the right fully of self-determination and using all ways and means to resist the occupation, including armed struggle. And they called upon all free people in Europe and US to go and fight beside the Ukrainians. And the NATO and Europe, US promised to support Ukraine with money, with arms, and the NATO will back that against the Russian occupation and invasion. They sanctioned Russia with 7 waves of layers of sanctions against it because they invaded and they occupied. We have the evil. We have the occupation, we have the invasion, and the long story, it's 75 years since Nakba. The short version, it's since 67, 58 years since this happened. We have the most well-documented conflict in history. What do you want? And you are dealing with us as demographic problem. This is a big shame. Of course, they are sending message, you don't exist. We're not recognizing you, your dignity, your rights, and people will revolt and they will resist. And that's what Hamas and Jihad Islamic did with other groups, you know, and oh, look, they are terrorists. And the West, even after the ICJ ruling, what they did after the ICJ provisional measures order, what they did nothing. So that's why there is more and more popularity against the occupation, against racism, against selectivity, against politicizing international law, against the West, who are complicit of denying the basic unalienable rights of the Palestinian people in their land.
You know, this, I have read a advisor to Prime Minister Sharon say the threat to Jewish state from the Palestinian womb, and the demographics. So this is something that they have as a threat. They focus a lot on, and that's a part of, you know, dealing with the Palestinian issue as a demographic issue rather than a human rights issue or a political issue. And that's been happening. And in case of Gaza, the disengagement, as you said, Mr. Raji, has not worked because there is war in 2008, 2009, then there was a war in 2014, then 2018 and 2019, and now the recent 2023 and ongoing. So the question then is there, if Israel wants a pure Jewish state and doesn't want the Palestinian demographics, what could be the contour of peace in Palestine?
We are not seeking too much. We are very, very humble in our demand. They cannot ignore us, and we are not going to be good victims. And Israel, sooner or later, will be forced to recognize our very, very existence as people with dignity, with a pride, with rights. And we are not a demographic problem for anybody. As I said it once and again, we are the stones of the valley. We are there, and no power on earth will be able to uproot us from there. If Europe think this is little land for them, they can give them a state. If US think this is little land for them, they can give them a state. They were looking for a state in Uganda and Argentina, in Myanmar and Palestine. They can give them somewhere else. I mean, and we are not moving anywhere. Not anywhere. And Israel, sooner or later, will recognize Palestinian people right of self-determination and independence. And if they don't recognize it, they are just digging the grave of their own state. Injustices cannot be, for good. I said it before, we have many conquerors came through Palestine, all of them gone. We stayed, and we will stay. We have no worries. We are strong enough because we have just, fair, and right cause, and because we are on the right side of history, and because we are not alone. All free, committed people across the globe, we know they support us.
So, one of the reasons why the international case for Palestine is not getting the international support is because of the US support for Israel. If you compare the Russian invasion in Ukraine, over 2 years, it is said that there has been less destruction in Ukraine than there has been in 2 months in Gaza. So much, much less, much more controlled. And yet, both in international media, in the UN, in sanctions, international law, Russia is far more heavily penalized. So we can see that what we call the West, but primarily the United States and France and England and Canada, what will it take for them to change their position, to become more empathetic or to become more realistic about a long-standing solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict?
I think we are bombed, killed by F-35 smart bombs and tanks bombs, which is produced by US and the West. Till this moment, the children of Gaza were killed with that. The women in Gaza are killed with that. The destruction of Gaza with these bombs. If US doesn't give Israel arms and even money, $14 billion as far, and if they don't have 11 arms deal with Israel since the war began, Israel won't be able to continue with that. More, they are providing them with full legal political cover at the Security Council and other ways. Even at the ICJ, they are defending them. What do you mean when Europe says, and US, Israel entitled for self-defense? Criminal, belligerent occupation have the right of self-defense. They are respecting nobody intelligence, Ahmad. I mean, this is absurd. Of course, this is the reason why we say they are complicit. They are part of this genocide in a process, and they are real cause of the pain and suffering Palestinian people have. Some of the European countries stopped doing that. I would say countries like Ireland, Luxembourg, Belgium, Spain, and Slovenia. And that's good and healthy sign. Some others on the way. But still, the real core, the real powers, US, France, Germany, UK, standing firmly behind Israel. They are against us and they are on the wrong side of history. And I hope sooner or later they realized what a grave mistake they committed and their position to be reversed. This big wrong cannot continue. We are seeing, in Europe, how the public opinion changes, how the civil society is changing. In the US, it's amazing what's going on there, especially among young generations. Yes, media and governments having that position, but thanks for the social media, which changed the landscape of politics. And I think the support Palestinian people do have now in the US and Europe among the people, among civil society, unprecedented. We are on the right track. And if Europe call itself democracy, I need somebody to explain to me how in UK, the country which most in Europe support Israel, has 1 million demonstrators against the Prime Minister and against Israel.
You see the demographic shift in the West, which is primarily immigrants coming from other countries, even Hispanics in the US. Also, the younger population, the university students, where Palestine is much more popular, as being a factor which will change the West's view of the Israel-Palestine and tilt the balance in favor of Palestine, particularly the
Ahmed,
university students.
I'm blacklisted in the US, and I was able to go with a special waiver in 2016. And I was in 14 universities, 3 think tanks, and many public lectures. I felt it. I felt it genuinely. Then, what about now? What we are having in Palestine, especially in Gaza, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, persecution, and the genocide, broadcasted live on air at the real time, and the whole world watch it. And that's making your mission much more easier. The West losing its moral, the West losing its fiber, the West losing its basic fundamental standards. You know, sometimes when I talk about international law, international humanitarian law, human rights, Geneva Conventions, Rome Statute, I feel like if this is Palestinian invention, it's not the creme de la creme of the human beings. I mean, why they bring you to this? We didn't invent Geneva Conventions. We didn't invent the ICJ. We didn't invent the ICC. We didn't invent Geneva Convention. Respect it. Implement it. You cannot disrespect my intelligence as people and you selectively deal with it as you are dealing, for example, with Ukraine. You have no right to do that. You are talking about immigrant and immigration, true, but not the whole truth. Because South Africa, do you know what does it mean South Africa take the case of the genocide to the ICJ, most important court on earth, and accuse Israel of the most serious crime on earth, genocide? Flashback a bit. The genocide came after the Second World War and after the Holocaust for Jews, Gypsies, other minorities, etc. And 85 million civilians killed in Europe in the Second World War. Israel accused of that. This is very serious. South Africa made history. The slogan of the Genocide Convention, which was made by the many Jews, never again against them. But for a Palestinian, that's fine. Shame on them and on the international community. We will not be a good victim. So South Africa gave them very tough lesson, not to Israel, but to the West. Learn rule of law, not the rule of jungle. Learn morality. Learn how to respect human beings and dignity of man. Lula of Brazil, very tough lesson gave to the West. Brazil, it's not hanky-panky country. It's very serious. And Lula is first-class leader. And he just against the injustices and against the rule of jungle. He said Israel should stop this genocide. It cannot be rewarded. So the word working out.
My question is, you've taken name of Brazil, South Africa, you've taken name of Chile, somewhat Spain, some other countries, but not any Muslim country. So where has the Muslim countries where have we lagged behind, and which Muslim countries, and where could we play more role, and haven't been playing a bold and courageous role in this conflict, the projection of the conflict and support of the Palestine? Because some of them say we do support financially and we've been supporting it throughout. But what is your view, or as a Palestinian, as a Gazan, what could have been done in this genocide?
My father taught me never ever ask free people what to do. If they are free, they know what to do. You cannot see entire nation facing genocide and you keep it quiet. الساكت عن الحق شيطان أخرس. If you see the injustice and you keep silent, you are part of that. We don't need tips and some money being given here and there. This is not a humanitarian case, and Palestine not charity. No. We are people with dignity, with pride, and we have first-class political and the human problem, and we want to see this is moving effectively and seriously. We want to see the Islamic Conference not representing amicus curiae to the court, to the ICJ, but to see them as a political weight. We want to see the Arab world moving in the right direction. I think we have quite a lot of power, and there is no excuse for whoever in the Islamic countries or the Arab countries to keep the conspiracy of silence about what's going on.
And so I want to take that a step further on the international dimension of it. We have been in a unipolar world, with the US being the only superpower, but there is another power that is rising, which is China, which will, of course, rebalance the global polarity. Do you foresee that with the rise of China, there may be more balance in the way the international community sees or takes action on the Arab-Israeli conflict?
I think China doing fantastic role. They understand what's going on, and they are very closely watching it, and they intervening in it. But why China should be Catholic more than the Pope? Mm-hmm. If the Arab world, stands still, if the Islamic world stands still, I mean, I was appalled with their amicus curiae to the ICJ. It was first class. They even said Palestinian people entitled for the right of self, for armed resistance, not only self-determination. They are recognizing even Hamas and Jihad Islamic. They condemned with the strongest terms what's going on, and they mentioned, the selectivity, politicization of international law. So on the thematic level, yes, there is a real position, by China. I hope, China be more effective practically, not just in thematic. The world is changing rapidly. I hope soon the monopoly of the US for the international politics being seized and being shared with other active countries. And I think the messages Brazil and South Africa sent was very, very serious. not only China, but the South, have a say in major issues. And I think when South Africa just filed the case at the ICJ, it was like a tsunami for the West. It's very qualitative, smart move had happened, supported timely by Brazil and others. And I think, China, Brazil, South Africa, others to join the fraction within even the European position, something will contribute to that hopefully soon.
My question, Pakistan founder was a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, a very good lawyer of the British Empire. And he largely fought the independence of Pakistan through constitutional and legal means, and made the legal case for it. Of course, World War II had weakened the British, so they wanted to leave. And given the point of recent ICJ ruling, do you think there is going to be a case for more legal human rights fight for Palestinian rights and freedom than a military or a self-defense method to do it?
We have Pakistani lawyers all the way long working with us, cooperating with us, supporting us tirelessly, whether it's known or unknown, but they were doing this for years and years and never ever they gave up. And we felt all the way long how much sympathy, support, not only for Palestine, but as a case symbolizing justice for Palestine. Sometimes in some conferences, our Pakistani colleagues speak, and I'm speechless on Palestine after them. Rule of law, very important and very needed. That doesn't mean you can see any country on earth liberated by law. There isn't a precedent in history. There isn't a people who achieved self-determination by law. Otherwise, this is easy mission. This is very costly path, blood, pain, suffering. But is it important to do this kind of struggle? Of course. Of course. I devoted all my life, all the way long for this. And I believed in rule of law. We are romantic revolutionaries who are believing justice and dignity of man. And we think this is one of the fronts. If we can make it through, it will make the mission for politicians very easy. Some were suspecting ever that one day we will be able to use universal jurisdiction against Israel. Europe changed the laws, and US, to stop us after we used that in 14 countries in Europe. And we were blocked politically. Nobody believed that one day we will be at the ICC and have an investigation opened. We are having an open investigation for Palestine situation by the ICC. And still, we are hoping and working to have this effective and to see some warrants like Putin happened, with some Israeli leaders. ICJ, this is our life dream, to have Israel there on the genocide, not on apartheid, the genocide. And we are doing that as one of the most well-documented conflict in histories. So it's not blah, blah. It's not just words. No, you are saying that in the court of law. But we have to be also aware that while we are investing our best in this, we are not committed for results, meaning we do use effectively, and we know how to use this to show moral legal superiority on a criminal who's doing war crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution, genocide against the Palestinian people, against Palestinian civilians. And this is great. In your struggle, you need the moral superiority always as a way and mean to achieving your rights.
Excellent. No, absolutely. I think you need the legal element of it, and you need to be coming from a position of strength also. Gaza has a lot of youth population, 70% migrants, refugees, 70%, I think 44% are less than 14 years old. An economy that is shattered, and a blockade that is stifling. What is the hope? What is the inspiration that keeps people there, standing, fighting, living? As you said, believing that you are the stones of the mountain. What is it that keeps people stay there and not leave? When, of course, the Israeli intention is to create conditions for people to leave. That's the easiest thing for them to happen. So what is it that keeps the inspiration of the struggle going?
Nothing worse than the injustice. Nothing on earth. And hard times always pushes either or, to give up or to stand for a challenge. We have no right to give up, but to stand for a challenge. We have no right to be good victims, because it's not a human to be a good victim. We cannot dispute our case. This is just fair, right cause. It's just the symbol of injustice on the globe. It's forbidden for us to lose hope. Losing hope, that's our end. And always we have to enjoy deep inside us the strategical optimism that if you are in the right side of history, defending just fair, right cause, and you believe in it, and you don't want to reward the criminal, you have to keep the fight, you have to keep the spirit, knowing one day we shall overcome, and we shall, inshallah.
My one observation during the second Intifada was on the Palestinian and particularly on the PLO leadership. So in 2002-3, most of the PLO leadership was put behind bars by the Israelis. And there was a young Christian lawyer called Michael Tarazi. And another lady, I think her name was Diana Bhutto. They managed to become the spokesperson of the Palestinian Authority, because everyone else were in prison. And they did a fantastic job of presenting articulately in a way the Western international audience would present. They were so effective and they were so damaging to the Israelis that the Israelis said, get them out of there, and they released the old PLO leadership, who then went back to the old ways. So the question is the old leadership of PLO, Mr. Mazen included and others, and not young people coming through, a hindrance in projecting the changing environment in Palestine, in the world, younger leadership to take over the Palestinian cause from the old generation?
I'm absolutely with you, and what you are saying is right. And that's why Palestinian national unity is vital and important. Palestinian internal democracy should be activated, and the change comes through that, the unity and elections, and believing, that. And I'm sure that this change will be coming sooner or later, and hopefully sooner.
Excellent. Any last message on for the people both in Asia, in the global south, and from you in terms of the support for Palestine and the future, your warning of what might happen? So both the warning as well as the hope about the future.
We are strong enough. You can count on us. But we are much, much stronger with the support and solidarity of people like you. Never ever be part of the conspiracy of silence. Being vocal, being demonstrative, show your solidarity and support in whatever way you can. Push your governments to act and to react positively. Be equipped with the knowledge and with the facts. Be sure that we are much, much stronger with you, and we are aware about the people, whether in Asia, Africa, Latin America, where their hearts and minds, like all free people in the group, in the world, lies. Keep the good work and keep the solidarity and keep always the strategic optimism, and be sure that one day we shall overcome together if we are united, striving against this injustice.
Thank you very much for a bold and a positive message. And thank you for watching another episode of the Alchemy of Transformation. We discussed the alchemy of peace in the Middle East, in the long-standing Israel-Palestinian conflict. And with us, we had someone who has an international lens, a local lens, who's a true stone of the valley, who's never going to leave. He had the means, the education, the exposure to leave Gaza and to have a good life of his own, but he didn't leave his people, didn't leave his history, the family, and has fought both legal battle, the political battle, suffering in prisons more than 4 times. We are very, very lucky to have Mr. Raji Sourani go through the history of Gaza, of how it had been at the crossroads, how it has been a place of tolerance of different cultures, of different religions. But unfortunately, because of outsiders, it has suffered a lot. And recently, 38,000 Gazans have died, more than 5,000 are injured. A third of them might die because of lack of hospital care. 10 children of Gazans are getting amputated every year. This is a horrible human condition to live in. And of course, places like Brazil, places like South Africa are doing their most, and it requires much more effort on the international front, OIC, the Arab League, by the Muslims to do that. But there is the legal case for dignity. There is the legal case for justice for the Palestinian people, for the human rights case. That is the case, above all, then case for purity of one state or another, or a demographic case. And I think that is the most important element, is of human dignity, of coexistence, of Jewish, Christian, Muslims, all other religions in a very holy land of Palestine, which has, of course, emotional, religious, and sentimental value to multiple religions. Thank you for joining us, and do subscribe to the Alchemy of Transformation podcast YouTube channel. Thank you once again.